The Connector Next Door is your invitation to meet the natural connectors all around us. They represent the everyday event planners who are energizing their communities every single day. Their stories are familiar, fun, and full of charm. Your host, Lisa Garrow, is a lifelong event planner and has been a connection strategy coach for over a decade. She knows events can become energized connecting points where communities can gather and grow. Let's listen in as she strikes up a conversation with today's Connector Next Door.
Riaz Meghji is a human connection expert and the author of the book, Every Conversation Counts, The 5 Habits of Human Connection That Build Extraordinary Relationships. After one conversation led him to take a dramatically different career path that changed his life for the better, he became dedicated to exploring the ways that authentic human connection can change lives and organizations. In addition to being a respected thought leader and author on the topic of human connection, Riaz is also an accomplished broadcaster with 17 years of television hosting experience. He has interviewed experts on current affairs, sports, entertainment, politics, and business. It was in November 2022 that I inhaled Riaz's book and message of connection. What a gift to learn more about Riaz in this conversation. Understand more about why every conversation really does count, and put my Sharpie to work gathering the many mic drop moments and insights he offered. You might want to get your Sharpie ready too. Welcome back, everyone, to the Connector Next Door and to a really special conversation with Riaz. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for taking the time. You're in Vancouver, and I was saying before we hit record, I've got my wonderful little Vancouver aquarium mug here. My daughter bought this on one of our last trips out west, but so glad that you're here to have this conversation. Loved your book and so many ideas I am excited to explore with you today. Welcome here.
Thank you. It was like it was meant to be for us to collaborate on something like this. So thanks for the invitation.
I love that you say that because I emailed you after inhaling your book on a flight, actually out to BC. That would have been, oh goodness, probably in November. And your concepts in the book are so relatable. I think for the event planners that are listening to this, I think there's so much we can learn from your world and your experience. But before we get into all of that, I would love to hear from you. What does the word connection mean to you in your world?
When I think about the word connection and the experience, I hope that I'm able to create and what I want to feel in that moment. A connection represents the reciprocity of authentic curiosity. And that reciprocity fosters acknowledgement, appreciation, and above all, acceptance, given our innate sense and need for belonging.
Mm-hmm. It's cool that you use the word acknowledgement. I was at a conference yesterday. We chatted about that. I was doing some activations at the Administrative Professionals Conference here in Calgary yesterday. And that word kept emerging, like with a lot of the different speakers and through the board, the executive that were there. And it was about acknowledging them in the room because quite often they feel like they're behind the scenes. A lot of admin pros are out there doing the hard work at their desk, and they're the glue that keep people together. But that acknowledgement, sometimes we forget how important that is to feeling connected and to helping someone else feel connected. That's beautiful. How does that show up in your world?
Well, if we're looking at the piece on acknowledgement, with the mantra of every conversation counts, I commonly get asked, well, what's the secret then, Riaz? How do you make every conversation count? My approach with this has always been to acknowledge somebody else's truth before I speak my own. And that is truly just leading with a sense of authentic and empathetic curiosity. I think the biggest mistake and trap that I've fallen into over the years as I came into my own and really did a deep dive in this space when it comes to meeting someone for the first time, especially in an experience that people are creating. And I observe this still when I work at events. We focus on fact instead of creating a feeling. And what I mean by this is that it's so easy when we first meet somebody and say you're creating this experience and activation for an audience to get to know each other. We want that sense of belonging. So we fall into the trap of this laundry list of accomplishments of this is me, this is my title, this is why I'm great, and forget about the opportunity to ignite a sense of self-discovery in this other person. And I think about what you just opened with of acknowledgement and how we just create space for our people in the room. And our son is just over 4 years old. I call him a little philosopher because when he said to me, maybe when he was 3 years old, he's like, "Daddy, I need space." I'm like, "Well, damn, don't we all?" And when we're activating a group and bringing everybody together, our innate desire is to serve them. So we want to give them so much value. But I feel the approach, especially with acknowledgement and connection, is to lead with addition by subtraction. Give them the space to do the work, to see each other, to ask them these questions, and above all, acknowledge one another on such a human level.
The idea of building space in, I think sometimes some of our clients, the people that are planning these events, they like to plan every minute. The minute by minute is so important. Yeah. And they start to worry sometimes where I'm like, oh, what if we built in this margin here, or there was some silence? What if there was just silence? Sometimes we feel like we're actually doing people a service by filling in the blanks for them, by making sure there's more to do so that we feel that awkward silence or the pregnant pause, like what's happening. And our tendency is to fill in the white space. In your book, this idea of every conversation counts, it's not just about talking. I think conversation is probably a bigger topic to you than just what words do you say?
One of the words that stood out before we started recording this, and you shared this word, was permission. And when we're sharing ideas, whether you're a presenter on stage or you're presenting at a team meeting or you're sharing a bit of yourself to somebody, if you're receiving the information, give the permission to just pause. If you're presenting the idea and it's a really thoughtful idea or question that involves an element of reflection from the audience, give them permission by pausing and just taking the moment. Like, I'll give you an example. One of the biggest questions I'll share consistently with the audience is, what do you consider to be one of the most important conversations of your life that got you to the point you're at today? And I will literally share this from the stage, and then I will pause. Because I then begin listening with my eyes and I see their eyes and they're looking up, they're looking to the side. They're like, whoa, this guy's going deep right off the top, because they haven't thought about this, but giving them the moment to pause and then acknowledging, look, I get that is a big question. There's a lot of thoughts probably going through your head right now, but pausing and acknowledging that emotion they might be feeling. So they feel like, oh, he gets it. He's not just throwing things at me here. We are in a connected space of a back and forth, and then actually activating the audience where they have the chance to break out in pairs and really share this moment, and then bring the room back and encourage and invite someone to share live on stage with me in a safe space to learn what was the moment and what was the lesson that can serve the greater good. Because sometimes what happens in conferences and meetings, I think the biggest mistake that happens when people speak up, again, the intent is pure, and maybe this is anxiety, maybe this is nerves. How many times have we seen at a conference experience, someone steps up to the microphone and it becomes a confessional? Like they haven't even asked a question after 2 minutes, where the speaker or presenter might have to say, okay, now Riaz, what is your question here? And it's thinking about what serves the room. If we're going to share, what is that idea? What is that question you could share with the entire audience so they can all think, I'm better off for having heard this. So always think of the greater good before thinking about your own personal interests.
Mm-hmm. So if we're able to open ourselves up to what does it mean? So yesterday's question was at this conference that I was facilitating, what do you want? And once we did our debrief, when we brought everybody back, like you said, everyone, all the attention back to the stage again. And I said, what was that like to be asked? What do you want? They're like, oh, that felt good. I haven't actually articulated that, even though they didn't say it to the person that asked them in this particular exercise. But I said, what did it feel like to ask somebody the question? And they said, oh, it was like kind of giving them a gift, because their eyes would light up. Because it was the exchange that was important, not just sort of the moment of information download. It was what was going on between the people that were asking each other. That's so beautiful. The title of your book is Every Conversation Counts. How did you come up with that title? And why was that, where you landed on that and you knew that was the message you wanted to get out in the world?
I remember the moment when those three words kind of stuck in of, why do I want this in my life right now? 3 days before I gave a TEDx talk at Simon Fraser University, where I went to business school before I defected into the broadcasting world 20 years ago. That TED talk happened in 2012, and a good friend of mine, just a few days before the talk, said, what's the title of your talk? Because I'm sure you're going to share great stories from what you've learned interviewing people for a living. And it really made me reflect on, why do I wake up? And at the time I was doing Breakfast Television Vancouver, the morning television show in our city. I'm like, why do I wake up at 3:30 in the morning every day to put myself on camera, hit the gas pedal on adrenaline and just, want to engage? And it was the gift of what can come out of a conversation, and understanding that we truly are one conversation away from living a completely different life. And every single day there was a conversation that could give the gift of an idea. And what stuck to me, and the passion behind it, was that every conversation counts. And if we walk in with the intention of what can we learn? I mean, we talk about the idea of space and listening. Are we listening to speak, or are we listening to learn? And every single day I was listening to learn. And when it came time to title the talk, it stuck with me. And then all these years, I thought maybe this could be a book. But I just kept documenting the lessons learned from prolific leaders, prolific figures that would share their elements of success. And connection was the through line. The most successful people were connected leaders that actually gave their own people permission to get personal. So I think it came out of that TED Talk like 10 years back. And it always stuck with me as a mantra of the way to live my life, that you never know what could happen in any given conversation.
And in those conversations, I'm guessing a lot of those people you didn't know, like you were coming into them cold. You might have done some research, or there might have been some kind of connection before. But when you would end a great conversation with somebody, what of that fed you? What of that is exciting for you and feels like, that was a great conversation?
That we were able to discover something that we didn't already know about that person. Like, here's the biggest mistake I made at the beginning of my career. To your point, I would do the research beforehand to understand who the subject is, and I'd come up with a list of questions that I thought were great for that person. And then I would evaluate the conversation of, hey, did I go down the list and get all those questions in? But soon I began to realize that information's already out there. Like, if we look at the idea of making an initial connection memorable, I encourage people now to ask questions that ChatGPT cannot answer. Because the beautiful part of AI is it confirms existing perspectives. But with the curiosity that we can lead with, how do we disrupt those? And how do we discover something that we didn't already know? So I would begin then walking into the green room, exchanging formalities with people with the approach of over preparing to improvise. Because preparation gives us confidence, But leaning and listening and improvising, that's where beautiful connection happens. And a simple activation and a simple question I would begin to throw out after exchanging formalities would be like, hey, so Lisa, what's on your mind? And the first response that would come out of that person's mouth, that would allow me to understand this is what this person cares about. And especially if that wasn't something, their response wasn't something that I knew before, it's follow their lead, because this is what they want to talk about. And sure, if we're doing it for television, you only have 5 to 7 minutes. There's a narrative that we want to get across. But organic connection really came from just giving space for them to answer questions like that. What's on your mind? Hey, what made you smile today? And then I think about, people in the event space, they're thinking about what's the best icebreaker we can ask, disarm that need to impress somebody and just reverse engineer it. Hey, Lisa, what makes you boring? Like, what do you really makes you boring? We're celebrating our quirks, right? Like for me, I love spreadsheets and I love watching WWE wrestling. That happened during the pandemic. I don't know why. I feel like a kid again. My wife's like, you're a grown man. What are you doing? I'm like, look at the storytelling. It's amazing. She's like, okay, I married this. I'm like, you married this. You signed the contract. But like embracing these moments of just humanity to come out.
Yeah. And that it's okay, whatever comes out. Like, I think if we're moving forward in a relationship, and not every relationship is going to be your best friend or going to be somebody that you'll connect with, over time forevermore, but just letting it be what it needs to be in that moment. There is this opportunity for them to actually say, what is true for me today? The value in a moment in time sometimes is enough. When we can say that, I told a little story about my dad. He has since passed away, 91, beautiful life, lived the last years with dementia. One of the most beautiful memories of conversations with my dad, probably the last 8 years, was his ability and joy in asking the question. And he would ask the same question over and over and over and over again. And it might be, Lisa, how's the business going? And I'd be like, great, Dad, everything's good. And, third time round, I'm like, yeah, well, there was this thing, because he doesn't remember. He wouldn't remember what I had said the last time around. But the gift was, by the 10th or 20th time, I'm having some tears. I'm like, yeah, this was really hard. And Dad, that was really a tough time. But it's in the question, it's a gift. It's a gift for people to not attach some kind of answer to the question. I'm a problem solver, so I have to watch myself in that. But where we can say, what's on your mind? We can say, what's true for you today, and let it be what it is. In the book, you talk a little bit about listening, and somebody that it seems like your life has been built on asking great questions, doing the research, being in control of what you need to release from that conversation. Where does listening fit into all of this?
I mean, listening is a critical part of connection. Listening precedes meaningful connection, and how we really understand ourselves and what our listening language is and what your listening language may be. I think in this culture of convenience, this culture of distraction, this culture of information that we're in, we're all overwhelmed. I mean, some of the neuroscience you probably remember from the book, the fact that our brains can absorb 400 to 500 words per minute. Yet the average person speaks at a rate of 125 words per minute. We're hardwired to just keep trying to absorb information. We have an insatiable appetite for information. So finding the intention to, one, as a starting point, audit our awareness and understand, well, how do we really listen? Because there's so many different listening styles, and how do we adapt it to the environment? And I'll give you some examples. If we're in a decision-making process where we need some critical thinking, is your listening style, I'm the one that is going to engage with some critique here so we can have a productive dialogue? Are you the style where you're more passive with how you consume what is being heard or seen with the words, and you want to digest first before you chime in? Or are you the type that's more relational with your listening, where you're asking engaging questions to deepen the rapport? One, understanding your listening style, I think, is really important. And then two, understanding how it's being received on the other side. Like, is this person, the way you are listening, are they opening up more? If they are, lean into that style. But if they're closing off, feeling like, oh, this person's not listening, I'm not being heard here, this person is truly just trying to stroke their own ego, they're competing in the conversation, they're not collaborating here, that's where we need to check ourselves. And I think a great question for transparency and clarity is, hey, Lisa, what is it like being on the other side of me? And that's a bold question to ask. But if you ask that to your teammates, if you ask that to your loved ones, that can help identify some powerful blind spots of what's missing or what's getting in the way, so you can be more present and listen when people need you the most.
Mm-hmm. It really, I think, puts a different perspective on it, right? Because it's acknowledging I'm not you. I hear and see and have my own perspective, that I feel, I'm comfortable here. I'm comfortable in my skin, or how especially at my age, I'm over 50 now. And a lot of us get very set in our ways, or we feel like, yeah, we've got this. We've been around this block a few times. But I love that, because it does open the door for others to walk in and say, this is what I'm observing, or this is what I'm hearing, or when you say this is what I understand it to be. We work a lot with volunteer teams or teams that are planning events. And so often, I just had this conversation yesterday, you're coming together. Usually you haven't worked on a project together. You've committed to something because you're passionate about the cause, or you're passionate about the group, or what you're trying to accomplish. But there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And so when we talk about listening, it seems like that would be a beautiful stance as a team starts to plan, starts to come together, starts to assign the task, that we're all listening to each other first, as opposed to saying, this is what I think should happen. When we're talking about listening as a group, have you ever come across that, where we're talking about collective listening, where there is something bigger at stake, there's something we're trying to accomplish together? How would you suggest planners could go about listening together, or creating even an environment, an atmosphere where we're all ready to listen to each other?
Well, to support that objective, the first thought that comes to mind is, as planners, if you're looking for new ideas and want everyone to feel heard, brainstorm for questions, not just for answers, and bring in maybe a remote expert, where it's somebody that doesn't work directly in your team, but is connected to the greater good or purpose of your objectives, where they're not fearing judgment. They're not fearing alienation. They are there just to serve and have a productive dialogue. So they're asking powerful questions and giving a fresh set of eyes of, you know what, I never looked at it that way. And what I believe the remote expert or brainstorming for questions represents is having a beginner's mind. And like, that is the difference, I believe, between confidence and arrogance, the humility to have and maintain a beginner's mind. Because in the beginner's mind, there are infinite possibilities of how something could go. So if we're focused on questions on, what if we priced it at this? What if we created that scenario, and just put all these questions on the board? We're not dismissing anything. We're just asking questions of, what could it look like if, and have this collective curiosity curated, then start to look at the possible solutions of, how could this make sense here? What could this reality look like? And I think that's how you break new ground, where people are excited and empowered to speak up, as opposed to, nah, I'm not going to share this. I'm going to be judged. They're not going to listen to it. They're not going to do anything with it anyways. It's ignite them with their own curiosity.
Well, and you said brainstorm for questions, not solutions. To start, it puts a different framework around how we're actually starting to work together. The project's going to happen. The event's going to happen. The thing is going to be a thing, because we've set the date. So it's not that somehow everything's going to fall apart and we're not going to have this event. I think when we start to look at the brainstorming for questions, the openness to say, I don't know it all. And the beginner's mind, how beautiful is that if we all go into a space understanding that we don't know it all, or that there's going to be things that we will be enlightened with by working with a brand new group, people that we haven't worked with before. For me, that's kind of exciting because I do love the newness of what's possible. I think for some people, this might be an encouragement to them to say, how do we start differently? And when we start differently, again, that foundation is going to be not just connection with those that are at your event, but you're going to create this connection with your team that is going to create its own rich experience before the event ever happens, which is so much more long lasting than any one date on a calendar.
Yeah, they'll feel acknowledged, they'll feel empowered, and they'll be motivated that they're a part of the process, because then they become co-creators. And at the end of the day, if there's an idea of how we could move forward collectively, people will support what they create. And so I believe listening and this concept of the beginner's mind, it makes things more inclusive because they'll feel like co-creators.
I am curious about you as a young connector. This is something that showed up for you when you were younger. Were you aware of the conversations you were having with others?
Oh, that's interesting. I was socially anxious, a complete introvert in high school. I struggled with it. And I would look at people that made it look effortless and think, wow, how do they do this? And, it wasn't until I switched high schools from grade 10 to 11. Up until grade 10, I just felt like I hadn't unleashed my potential. And then I credit my older brother, Zane, who was a part of an improv group at North Delta Senior Secondary here in British Columbia. And I watched it and I was like, what if I could show up in this dynamic way? So I ended up taking an acting class and really began to come out of my shell. And, the credit to improv artists, actually this year in 2023, I told my wife, because I wanted us to connect. Life was getting so busy and we were starting to feel disconnected. And I said, let's take an improv class every Monday night. It's date night. It's 3 hours. I know
my
the
gosh,
instructor.
that's hilarious. That's awesome.
And it was such a fun exercise, Lisa. Like, it was so refreshing. And she's like, oh my God, I'm sweating here. What are you doing?
Like sweating from nerves, or she was just into it?
You know what? The nerves in the beginning, but she was into it at the end. And I remember the instructor asked every single student at the beginning of this class, why are you here? What do you want? To your question. And, life got heavy for us in the past couple of years with loss. And I realized I personally stopped smiling. So at the beginning of that class, I said, I want to smile more. And the instructor just kind of looked at me and he was like, oh, interesting. And by the end of this class, Lisa, man, we were cracking up. The inhibitions were gone. It was a safe space to just play. If you failed, it didn't matter. You just showed up and made offerings. And we were not only laughing, we were smiling more. And it really made me appreciate, and you referenced my son, Nico. Children are such beautiful and talented improv artists because they're always giving us offerings. And I've been guilty of this as a parent. Sometimes I'm so busy, I'll dismiss what he's giving. And I'm like, he is a genius. So we actually started using these improv exercises with them, being like, there once was a boy named, he's like, Nico. And Nico went to, and then he'd start filling in the gaps and we'd have this beautiful point of connection. And it just reminded me of just staying present in the moment and almost instead of thinking, what is my next witty comeback, leaning into the moment with a beautiful sense of authentic wonder of what is that next step of what could happen here. And just think, just the next mundane step. It doesn't have to be the brilliant contribution or element to the conversation, but just the next logical step, and people will appreciate and gravitate towards this realness.
How fun is that as a date night? That's such a good idea. And I am such an improv fan. In fact, the first time I was in college out in BC, and it was in Vancouver, Back Alley Theater. I don't know if it's still there.
Oh, I don't know.
But it was just a place that we would go. It was literally in a back alley and down kind of these stairs. And we'd go to improv on a Friday night. And there is something so beautiful and childlike and playful about being able to participate. Even as an audience, you're participating with the actors. So there's a real joy in the exchange.
Yeah.
One of the things that I hear a lot at improv is the both and. So you're continuing the story. You're not just putting a period on it, but and. Even your story of coming from a place where maybe more introverted, maybe you felt like you didn't have that experience, but you did the work, or you made the choice to say, what if? What if I could actually feel comfortable? What if I could have, be confident or have that ability to show up, and whatever's going to come at me, I've got this.
It's a sentiment that's really made me, I've been thinking a lot about imposter syndrome recently. And, that moment in high school of the what if, of just leaning into this space and letting the true personality come out. I think about falling into the trap of following my parents' dreams of following a safe financial path, and then defecting into broadcasting, and then thinking, who am I to do this? Who am I to write a book on human connection? Or is this going to resonate with people? And the more you do it, I mean, action precedes clarity. Action precedes this confidence of showing up, of what could happen. What if you did? And it's really made me rethink imposter syndrome, that maybe imposter syndrome isn't a bad thing. Because if you don't have imposter syndrome, maybe it means the goal just isn't big enough. And there isn't that opportunity to just grow and discover something new. So if I feel that imposter syndrome, I'm telling myself, I'm in the right place right now.
And it's not necessarily, if you're an imposter, it just means that you're not there yet. That you haven't come to that space where you own it.
I'm writing that down. I like that.
Ooh, imposter. I like that too. I'm going to take that one home with me too. We are getting yet. To not there yet.
Beautiful.
I don't know if I'll ever get wherever there is. I always feel like there's something new to learn, a new conversation to have. And this has been so incredible to have this time with you, Riaz. Thank you for taking the time. Before I say goodbye, though, what would be some advice? That human connection that you talk about, what would be some advice for those that are out there working to bring people together? If we could leave them with one thing, I know that's hard. One thing's always hard. What would you leave them with today?
After everything we've discussed with the topic of connection in the beginner's mind, if we want to just to continue to grow and ask ourselves, well, what does meaningful progress look like? If we're not there yet, how are we going to continue to try and strive forward? The thing that stands out to me is get a coach and stay coachable. I believe that's what's driven success in my life, whether it was a relationship coach, a financial coach, a health and wellness coach, a fitness coach, everything. I will always ask the questions and defer to the expertise that is not my area where I thrive yet, and ask them, what do I need to do to just move forward? So if there's something that I could offer in the space of connection and relationship and ultimate success in life, is stay open to getting a coach, and open when somebody leans into you, that their intention, especially if it's a trust with a coach, that they're not calling you out. Hey, look, they're leaning in because they're calling you up.
And you said be coachable. And I think that is a lifelong opportunity for us to say, we don't know it all. That we are always in that position, that some curveball is going to come, or some change in our plan, or life's going to hit us in the face. And then what? And the idea of remaining coachable, ready to go, ready to learn, and ready to have these conversations that count. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time with me. If someone wanted to get a hold of you, wants to purchase the book, I've been listening on Audible. I've listened to it 1.5 times now. I actually had some time in the car going to the mountains. I took myself away last week and put it back on again. And I feel so strongly that this is a book that should really be something that we put on our shelf, whether it's a virtual, you're listening to an audiobook, or if this is something that they order from you, but it's something that will enhance how you plan your events, how you connect with your teams. I know that so many people that are listening to this, you're behind the scenes and you feel like you may not have that power to change the conversation, but you can start having conversations that matter. How can people pick up the book? Are you willing for them to reach out to you? How do they do that?
Yeah, if anyone wants to get in touch, and thank you. That is so generous with your feedback on the book. That is such meaningful feedback, especially in the space you're working in. So thank you, Lisa. If anyone wants to stay in touch or learn more, riazmeghji.com. Just check it out. Everything with the book and the message and keynotes is all on the website.
Awesome. Thank you again. I'm sure we'll talk again. It would be wonderful to pick this up another day.
All right, let's keep it going. Thanks, Lisa.
The Connector Next Door podcast is produced by Candy Event Consulting, where everyday event planners and their teams gain clarity, get connected, and grow in confidence. Subscribe at www.candyconsulting.ca to hear visits with everyday event planners who are putting connections first.